The chicken was still hot when my son set down his fork, leaned back in his chair, and smiled the way he always did when he'd already made up his mind about something and was only telling me as a formality. "So," he said, glancing sideways at my daughter-in-law, "we wanted to run something by you." My daughter-in-law kept her eyes on her plate. She already knew what was coming. "Our lease is up at the end of next month." He said it casually, the way you'd mention a traffic delay. "We looked at some places, but the market's brutal right now. Nothing makes sense, especially with the baby coming and her cutting back her hours." He paused. "We figured staying here for a while is the obvious move, just until we get back on our feet." I reached for my water glass. "That's going to be a problem," I said. His smile held for a second. Then it shifted. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I've already accepted an offer on the house." The table went quiet. Not the comfortable kind. The kind where you can hear the refrigerator running in the next room. "I'm sorry," he said. "I accepted an offer 3 weeks ago. Closing is set for the end of next month." I set down the glass. "The timing isn't ideal, I understand that." My daughter-in-law looked at my son. My son looked at me. Neither of them spoke. "You sold the house," he finally said. Not a question. More like he was trying the words on to see if they fit right. "Yes." "Without telling us." "I didn't realize I needed to." He pushed back from the table. Not hard, but with purpose. "Mom, this is a major decision. You didn't think to mention it once?" "I mentioned thinking about downsizing about a year ago. You said, and I'm fairly certain I'm quoting, that it seemed like a lot of hassle for no real reason." He opened his mouth, closed it. My daughter-in-law set her fork down very carefully. "Where are you going to live?" "I found a condo, 1 story, near the medical center, elevator in the building. It's smaller, but it suits me better now." I picked up my fork again. "The chicken's going to get cold." Nobody touched their food. They left 40 minutes later without dessert. My son gave me a stiff hug at the door. My daughter-in-law didn't. The porch light caught the set of her jaw as she walked to the car, and I stood in the doorway and watched their taillights disappear before I went back inside and cleared the table. I didn't cry. I made a cup of decaf and sat at the kitchen table and let the quiet settle around me. On the counter, the dish towel I'd used to pull the pan from the oven was still folded in thirds. The clock above the stove read 8:17. Outside, a neighbor's sprinkler kicked on and ran its cycle and stopped. I had known this conversation was coming. I just hadn't known it would arrive like a renovation plan, with my house already assigned a role I'd never agreed to play. I went to bed at 9. I slept better than I had in months. He came back 2 days later, alone, which surprised me. I'd expected them both. I let him in and poured 2 cups of coffee without asking. He sat in the same chair he'd used Sunday, but this time he didn't lean back. He sat forward, elbows on the table, like a man who'd rehearsed something and wasn't sure it would hold. "I've been thinking," he started. I assumed. "You can't just sell the house without telling us. We've been planning around this." I set a cup in front of him. "Planning what exactly?" He looked up. "Mom." "I'd like to hear it said plainly." He exhaled. "We assumed that if things got tight, this would be an option. That was always in the back of our minds." "An option you never asked me about." "It's your house. We didn't think we had to ask." I sat down across from him. "That's the part I keep turning over. You didn't think to ask. But you were counting on it." I wrapped my hands around my mug. "Do you understand how that sounds?" He was quiet. "Curtis," I said it gently, "I love you. That hasn't changed. But this house was never a safety net I was holding in reserve for you. It was my home." I paused, and I fell on the front steps back in November. "I didn't tell you because you would have worried, and also because I knew you wouldn't come to fix the steps. I called a handyman." Something moved across his face. Not quite guilt. More like the look of a person doing math they don't like the answer to. "The roof had a slow leak last spring," I continued. "The furnace needed service in January. The gutters were a disaster after that ice storm in February. I handled all of it, alone. Not once did you offer, and not once did I ask, because I already knew how that conversation would go." I took a sip of coffee. But you assumed this house would be available when you needed it. That's a significant gap, Curtis. He stared at the table. The condo I found is closer to my doctor, my church, the grocery store, I said. 1 floor, no yard, no stairs. I can lock the door and visit my sister in Tucson without worrying about the pipes freezing. I set down the mug. I made a responsible decision about my own life. I'm sorry it didn't fit your timeline. He sat for a while without speaking. When he left, he didn't slam the door. He just left. The truth was, I had made the decision before any of this, long before that Sunday dinner. It started on a February Saturday, ordinary in every way. I was looking for an extension cord in the garage, the kind of errand that takes 5 minutes if nothing's wrong. I pulled the chain on the overhead light and I stopped. There were boxes against the back wall, 4 of them, stacked neatly, sealed with packing tape, labeled in my son's handwriting. One said nursery supplies. Another said Curtis, kitchen overflow. A third was marked MISC, seasonal, and the fourth, the largest, simply said books by. I stood in the cold garage for a long time. None of those boxes had been there the week before. No one had called. No one had asked. They had simply appeared, the way furniture appears in a room when someone has already decided they're moving in and is working out the logistics. My garage had become a storage unit for a life I hadn't agreed to host. I didn't touch the boxes. I didn't text my son. I went inside, put the kettle on, and sat at the kitchen table until the sun had moved all the way across the floor and the room had gone dim. That evening, I called Yvette. We'd worked together at the school district for 11 years before I retired. She in the front office, me in the classroom. And she had a way of listening that I didn't find in most people. She let you finish. I told her what I'd found. I didn't editorialize. I just described what I saw. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How long has it been since someone asked how you were doing?" I didn't answer right away. She said, "I'll come by tomorrow." What I actually wanted, I hadn't let myself sit with it directly in years. I wanted to be warm in January without a furnace that sounded like it was deciding whether to keep going. I wanted to wake up on a Sunday and go to the farmer's market without leaving a mental list of things that needed tending before I could feel like I'd earned the morning. I wanted stairs that didn't remind me of the November fall I'd told no one about. Yvette came by the next afternoon with kolaches from the bakery on 5th. We sat at the kitchen table and I said out loud, for the first time, that I had been maintaining this house with no help and no acknowledgement for 3 years straight, and that I was tired in a way that sleep didn't touch. "Then sell it," she said. I blinked. "Just like that? You own it outright, 26 years. You've done your part." She broke off a piece of collage. "What's keeping you?" The honest answer was habit. The sense that the house was proof of something, my steadiness, my permanence, and something harder to name. The feeling that selling would mean admitting I couldn't do it anymore. But I could do it. That wasn't the point. The point was that I was doing it entirely alone, while my son stored boxes in my garage without asking and made quiet plans around a resource that had never been offered. "I'd need the timing to be right," I said. Yvette smiled. "I know someone." The agent she sent me was discreet and efficient. I'll keep her mostly out of this story, except to say that she told me the market in my neighborhood was strong. Paid-off house, well-maintained, original hardwood floors, goods school zone, and that serious buyers would come quickly if we started with a quiet, off-market listing. We did. I had a full-price offer within 12 days. A couple relocating from out of state, both teachers, who had been searching for 2 years. Their letter said they'd nearly given up. They came in $5,000 over asking and waived the inspection contingency. I accepted the same afternoon. I did not tell my son. Not entirely out of strategy. It was simpler than that. The house was mine. The decision was mine. I planned to tell him at dinner, and when he arrived that Sunday and announced his own plans before I could say a word, I understood that I had been right to move when I did. 3 days after Curtis's second visit, my daughter-in-law posted something online. I found out through my neighbor Gert, who texted me a screenshot with a string of question marks after it. The post was in the neighborhood Facebook group, one I belonged to but rarely checked. My daughter-in-law had written it under the guise of asking for housing advice, but the framing was unmistakable. We're expecting our first baby and we're counting on a family member for temporary housing. But that option fell through at the last minute without any warning. After several lines about the housing market and stress, and the challenges facing young families today, there was a single sentence near the end that sat like a stone. I guess not everyone sees family the same way. The comments were what they always are, sympathetic, one-sided, fueled by half a story. Several people offered apartment leads. Others said so sorry and hang in there. One woman I'd never met wrote some people just don't understand what their kids go through and collected 16 reactions. I put the phone down. I made dinner. I watered the houseplants on the windowsill. I did not reply. I had learned over many years that people who needed to believe a version of a story would believe it regardless of what I said. And the people who actually knew me already had enough information to form their own view. Gert texted again that evening, didn't say a word. Also, there are zucchini from the garden on your porch. There were 3 of them in a paper bag. I printed the screenshot and slipped it into my filing cabinet, in the folder I'd started keeping for this kind of thing. 10 days before closing, I opened that filing cabinet for an insurance document I needed, and I noticed immediately that something was off. I'm organized in a specific way that some people find excessive. Every folder is labeled, every document faces the same direction. I know exactly what order things are in because I've lived alone for a decade and no one has ever found anything for me. The estate folder, the one kept in the back, behind the tax records, was angled slightly forward in the drawer. The tab was tilted in a way I don't leave it, and when I opened it, the papers were out of sequence. My will, which I always keep on top, was behind the beneficiary designations. My life insurance copy was folded when it should have been flat. I stood at the cabinet for a long time. Curtis still had a key to the house. He'd had it since his father passed years ago for emergencies. He'd used it once that I knew of, to pick up a piece of furniture I'd offered him. I'd never thought to ask for it back. I couldn't prove anything, but I didn't need to prove it in a courtroom. I knew what I knew, and what I knew was enough. I called my attorney that afternoon. She has handled my affairs for 14 years, the same woman who managed my late husband's estate, my mortgage refinancing, and the small trust I'd set up afterward. I told her I needed to come in as soon as possible. She scheduled me for Thursday. When I sat across from her desk and explained what I'd found, she didn't look surprised. She pulled the relevant forms without my asking. I wanted 3 things. First, my existing power of attorney revoked and replaced with one that required a physician's written declaration of incapacity and an independent third-party review before any agent could act on my behalf. Second, my will updated. Third, my investment accounts restructured so that any changes required dual written authorization. She walked me through each one carefully, spent nearly 2 hours at that desk. When we were done, the name that had appeared as primary beneficiary in my old will no longer appeared anywhere in the new documents. I didn't feel angry when I signed those papers. I felt clear. The cold, bracing kind of clear that comes when you've finally stopped pretending you didn't see what you saw. A week before I moved out, my daughter-in-law came to the house alone. She knocked. That surprised me. Curtis had stopped knocking sometime in the past few years, treating the door as a formality. But she knocked, and when I opened it, she looked smaller than usual, her shoulders pulled in, her eyes rimmed red. I stepped aside and let her in, offered water. She took it. She sat on the couch and told me, without quite meeting my eyes, that she hadn't meant for the post to go the way it did, that she'd written it late at night out of frustration, that she knew things were hard between all of us and she didn't want to make them worse. I let her finish. Then I walked to the desk in the corner, opened the bottom drawer, and took out a folder I'd prepared in advance. I set it on the coffee table between us. "I want you to see something," I said. Inside was a single printed page. At the top, Family Financial Support, itemized 2018 to 2024. Below that, a 2-column table. Security deposit, first apartment, $1,400. 4 car. Down payment, 2019, $3,500. Emergency dental, $2,100. 6 months rent assistance during the layoff 2021, $6,000 partial medical bills 2022, 1,850. Moving truck and supplies 2020, $900. Emergency veterinary care, $1,600. Groceries, gas, and incidentals over 6 years, estimated 3. Total given, 25 year 8. Zio. She stared at it. She read it twice. I didn't keep this to use it against you, I said. I kept it because I needed to remember clearly what I'd already given before someone asked me to give more. She looked up. Her eyes were wet, but she held it together. We didn't think of it as she started. I know. You thought of it as family. I sat back. I thought of it as family too, which is why I never asked for any of it back. But family works in both directions. When I needed help maintaining this house, it wasn't there. When I needed someone to ask how I was managing on my own, no one did. I let that settle. So I made my own arrangements. She folded the paper slowly along its crease, set it back on the table. She didn't take it with her. I'm sorry, she said, quietly, like she meant it. I know, I said. She left about 10 minutes later. No arguments, no escalation, just the soft sound of the front door latching behind her. Moving day was a Tuesday. The movers were professional and efficient, 2 men who worked quickly and asked before touching anything. By early afternoon, the house was empty. The floors looked wider than I remembered them. The walls showed faint outlines where the pictures had been. I walked through each room once, not to mourn exactly, more to close a set of parentheses. I had raised my son in this house, cooked 20-some years of meals in that kitchen, sat in the front window seat through 3 seasons of insomnia, watching the street lamp at the corner do whatever it wanted to do. The house held all of that, but it was also just a structures. Plaster, wood, glass, shingles, and I had given it everything I had to give. That was enough. That was more than enough. I left the keys on the kitchen counter the way we'd arranged. I picked up my thermos and my purse and walked out the back door, which I had always preferred, and I did not look at the front of the house when I pulled out of the driveway. Curtis was waiting in the parking lot of the storage facility. I'd texted him the address that morning and a time, no explanation. He was leaning against his car, hands in his jacket pockets, looking tired in a way that was different from the anger tired I'd been seeing. This was the other kind. I handed him an envelope. Inside was a key and a slip of paper with the unit number and the access code. Your boxes from the garage, I said. Everything you stored there. I had it all moved over last week. The first 3 months are paid. After that, it's yours to manage. He took the envelope carefully. You didn't have to do that, he said. I didn't want to hold on to things that weren't mine. He turned the key over in his palm. I know you think I did all of this to punish you, I said. I want you to know that isn't true. I sold the house because it was the right time and the right decision for my life. What you built around that assumption is yours to sort through. I paused. I hope you find something good. He looked at me for a long moment. Not with the tightness I'd seen these past weeks. Something else. Are you going to be okay? He asked. It was the first time he'd asked me that in longer than I could remember. I'm going to be better than okay, I said. He nodded. No hug. But he held the eye contact, and that was something. I drove to the condo. Yvette was already there with sunflowers from the market on Elm and a bottle of sparkling water because she knows I don't drink. We unfolded 2 camp chairs on the small patio, the furniture not arriving until Thursday, and sat in the afternoon sun with our feet up on the railing. Well, she said. I looked out at the courtyard below, a bench, a little fountain, 2 older men playing chess at a shaded table. Nobody needed anything from me. Quiet, I said. It's very quiet. She smiled. Good. 4 months later, a card arrived in the mail. My son's handwriting on the envelope, no return address. Inside, 1 folded sheet. Mom, I've written this a few different times and deleted it, so I'm just going to send it before I talk myself out of it. I've been thinking about what you said, about not asking. I didn't understand, when you said it, how much of our whole dynamic was built on us not asking. I told myself asking wasn't necessary because, and I can hear how this sounds now, because I assumed you'd always just be there, like a given, not a person with her own plans. I'm not asking you to forget any of it. I know I put you in a bad spot, and I know you'd been in a bad spot for longer than that without me noticing. I just wanted to say it plainly. I'm sorry. I'm glad you got out when you did. Curtis. I read it twice. Then I poured a cup of coffee, carried it to the window seat, the new one, the one that faces the courtyard, and sat with the letter in my lap and the morning light across my hands. I didn't write back right away. Some things need to breathe first. But I kept the letter, tucked it into the side pocket of my planner, right next to the page where I'd checked off every last thing on the list I made the night I decided. Outside, the chess players were setting up their board. The fountain was running its low, steady sound. A woman passed below with a dog on a leash and a coffee cup in her other hand, and she glanced up at the window and gave a small nod. The kind people give here, without obligation, just simple acknowledgement. I hadn't arrived at this life by accident. I had prepared for it quietly and carefully and entirely on my own terms, while no one was paying attention. And now it was mine. Wholly, completely undeniably mine. I reached for my pen and turned to a fresh page in the planner. At the top I wrote, "Write Curtis back, when you're ready." Then I set the pen down and looked out the window and let myself just be still for a while. No house to worry over. No gutters, no leaks, no stairs, no one waiting for something I hadn't agreed to give. Just this, just the morning, just me.